Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Corey Webb, and I'm a Marketing and Partnership Director here at Churn Zero, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled NextGen CS, Effective Business Leadership and Simple AI Strategies. Before we get started today, I do want to remind you that we are recording this session. I know we always get lots of questions around that. We will be sending a link to the recording out tomorrow via email. But please, throughout the presentation, you can submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of this webinar. We've also enabled chat today, so Jan will go ahead and give some prompts, so please engage with one another in the chat. But then when you do have questions, it would be easier for us if you would funnel those into the Q&A, but we will try and keep an eye on both. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker today, Jan Young. Jan is the founder of Jan Young CS Consultancy and Step Up Exchange, which is a project-based learning community to accelerate your career, and then also CX Exchange, which is a peer-to-peer volunteer-led community for CS professionals. Her mission is to transform CS leaders into business leaders, which is why we're really excited to have her here today to talk to us about this topic. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jan.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Always love partnering with Churn Zero. Okay, so great. So I just want to kick things off and let folks know this is going to be very interactive. So I want to see you in the chat. Now, one of the first things we do in CX Exchange Success Hour is we put our LinkedIn URL and whoops, I can only see. There we go. So put your LinkedIn URL and where you are today. So I'm in Los Angeles. I always get excited when I get to say I'm at home, even though I love traveling. And all right, so we got Jersey City. Excellent. And we'll see if anybody else is armed and ready. But I'd love to see, oh, look, another person from LA. Great. But I'd love to help people connect with each other. I think it's really important how we build our community and how it helps us exchange ideas. So you're going to see that theme a lot today. Great. And love that. Look, more people from LA. I had no idea. So I'm going to put my link here again to be sure to connect with folks. Okay, so let's dig in though. And I just want to start my timer so I know how much time I'm spending here. Okay, so let's dig in. We're talking about NextGen CS leadership, and we're talking about business leadership and AI. And I really, want you to see how these things are integrated. And you may not be thinking about business leadership. You may not even be thinking about yourself as a business leader. But by the end of the session today, I want you to really I want to be like, yes, and really embrace it. I want you to think about yourself as a business leader in tech. And I think you'll get it as we go through. But let me first just a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I've been in tech for over 20 years, and excuse me, I am just trying to get over something. So my voice is a little off and I might need to clear my throat occasionally. But okay, I've been in tech for over 20 years, and I say tech and not CS specifically because I've worked in a variety of different areas. And I really bring that interdisciplinary approach to everything I do and how I think about my first love, which is CS. Now that I have these sort of 20 plus years of experience, now I'm really focused on go-to-market alignment, customer revenue, and customer success. And as I was just introduced, as you just mentioned, I really do focus on transforming post-acquisition leaders, and I mean all leaders, anybody after that initial sale, all leaders into business leaders to help you empower and align go-to-market teams. And that's really my passion and my focus. So I teach courses, I lead communities. You'll see that I'm involved in a number of things, and I'll share more in terms of how you can connect with me and get involved in these communities at the end of the session. Now, what Oh, shoot, I had a bunch of notes here and they're all gone, of course. So let me just start with bringing together a number of different areas uh, of what we'll be talking about today and how we think about our CS programs. Now, one is AI, and you may or may not be doing much with AI yet today. Another is data-driven insights and how we incorporate those into our decision making. Digital CS, if you're using a tool, whether it is for your long tail customers or throughout for all of your customers, you're using digital CS. And then something you may not be thinking about, but is influencing you and impacting you, and that's our shifting economics that we've been really kind of going through a roller coaster here for the last few years. When you bring all of this together, then this is what we should be thinking about and using in our tool belt as we think about customer success. And it should then help us step up into business leadership. Now, this is more interactive time. I want you to put a 3 in the chat if you've worked in tech for at least 3 years. So put a 3 or a 5 if it's been 5 years. 10, do I see any 10 years? Some. 15, any 15 years? 20, anybody? 20 years? And be sure to include it to everyone, not just the hosts and panelists. Okay, 25 years. Wow. Now, I want to, now one other question. What about layoffs? Has anybody been impacted by a layoff in tech ever in your career? Or have you had a friend impacted by a tech layoff? Okay. Yeah. So maybe even a little bit of tech PTSD sometimes from that. Okay, so I want to, and sorry if I'm looking over to the right, it's because I'm looking at the chat I have over on the side. So I want to provide some context for what we've all experienced, and I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about how tech influences the market. Now, I got into tech during the dot-com boom and then crash, right? And so if for any of you that have been around for 20 and even the 25 years, you probably remember this as well, right? And so at the time, because we took such a nosedive in our economy, that's when the federal bank, they lowered the interest rates. Okay, so we had very low interest rates, and they did that to stimulate the economy. And it did, and we started to come back from it. Even tech started to slowly come back from that. Now, in 2008, for anybody who's been around for around 15 years, perhaps you remember that we had a housing crash, right? And when we had that housing crash, the economy went whew, in the dumper. But that isn't what happened to tech. And so really what I'm showing you here in this line, this trajectory, this isn't about the market. This is actually about our experience in tech. Right? And so in tech, because the interest rates went low, they went even lower. They went down to what something is called ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, which is an economic policy that none of us have really heard of unless you're an economist. But in fact, ZIRP is something that is commonly known by them, and it's when your interest rates are really, really low, close to zero, right? So they lowered the interest rates, all the way down, and that was to help stimulate the economy. But when you think about it, investors, they had no place to put their money, right? There's no place you're not going to put it in a savings account or something to make money because the interest rates are real low. And investors, even more so, they didn't have any place to make money. So they started to invest in tech. Now, startups are a risky thing, but at the time, why not? They had nothing to lose. There was no other place to make money. So they started to put their money in tech. And so then we get up to about 2015, right? And that's about 10 years ago. And we still had low interest rates. So the interest rates went up a little bit, but we still had low interest rates. And so we still had more and more money going in to tech. All right. So we had a real big boom that was going on. And so many people were working in startups, they didn't even feel that risky anymore, right? Because there was so much cheap money that was coming in. Is any of this ringing a bell for anybody? Put yes if this is ringing a bell for you if you've experienced any of this. And now let's think about 2020. That's 5 years ago. What happened in 2020? Anybody? Anybody? What happened in 2020? Anybody want to take a guess? COVID. I have COVID right now that I'm recovering from. Yep, COVID. Pandemic. And with the pandemic, again, they wanted to stimulate the economy. And so, because they were really worried about it, right? We're all staying indoors, all of that stuff. So we still had those low interest rates. So they went back down to zero and they went back down to zero interest rate, right? And this is a zero interest rate policy, right? Where we had, so now you see that we've had historically low interest rates all this period. And all of this then, all of the focus on startups with investors is when they were just like, let's see you grow. We just want to see you grow, growth at any cost. And it was all about acquisition. You remember this, right? If you've grown up in tech during this period, it was gong, hit the gong for every new sale. We have a company called Gong because of that, right? Gong, all of that. Celebrate every new sale. It's all about acquisition. And here we are working in CS and we're like, anybody care about us? And they're like, no, acquisition, 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 right? Remember this, right? Anybody? Anybody? COVID is the last thing I see here. All right. So yes, all right. So I'm hearing from people. Yes, you're resonating. Now, with the pandemic, which again wasn't good for the economy, but it was fantastic for tech. And so you see tech, we were like, that's when we started Zooming, right? And we got Zoom on right now. This is, where we started meeting virtually. We needed all these, tools to use at home. We started working from home, all of the tools we needed to work virtually, right? And then in 2022, we're doing well, and our economy, our general economy is doing great. But tech, that's not good for tech because the interest rates started to go up. And people then, investors, started to take their money out of tech. And then they started to say, okay, if I'm going to keep my money in your investment, in your risky startup, I want you to show me that you're profitable. I want to see that you're efficient. So it wasn't growth at any cost anymore. It was profitable, efficient growth that they're looking for. Okay. And so that's when even though the economy's doing great, we had layoffs. 2023 saw the biggest decline in VC funded companies. Over 3,200 startups failed in 2023. And we know that, right? That's one of the layoffs that we felt. Okay. But another thing that's happened around all this time is we've had generative AI that started, ChatGPT and all of that, OpenAI in 2022. And now agentic AI is something that we've seen a lot of, right? And so AI now is a big part of the efficiency. And so when we're looking at profitable, efficient growth, now we're looking at using AI to gain those efficiencies. All right, so I hope that you've enjoyed this sort of time through. We are not exactly sure where the economy and the interest rates and all of those things are going right now because we're kind of going through another loop, right? Now we've got the tariffs and, we don't know where those are going to land. And so we've got some question marks going on here. But what you see now through all of this is it's not just that tech influences the market, but also the market influences tech, right? And we are firmly in a profitable, efficient growth era. And we're in the era of AI, both generative AI, all other types of AI, and agentic AI. Okay, so I spent a lot of time on this slide. but I wanted you to come with me on this journey, and I want to be sure that we're all here together. Okay. So, take a minute. I just showed a graph about market economics, right? And that's how I decide to start this webinar. Why would I do that? And now I'm going to have a slide about investors. Okay. And you might be thinking, why do I care about any of this? All right. Now, I just showed you how the market impacts tech, right? And that has impacted you literally every day of your career. And in fact, investors have been a big part of that, and they have impacted you every day of your career, even if you haven't given them another thought. So I just want to check in and talk about different types of investors, because unless you're bootstrapped at your company, you have some sort of investors and they're impacting you. It's important to know what type. So we have venture capital, and venture capital is basically looking for like a 7 to 10 year return. And so you want to think about how many years you've been as in business as your startup, because when you're getting to like the 7 to 10 year mark, that's kind of important. And you also want to think about like who you're actually interacting with. General partners are usually who you interact with. LPs are just the folks with the money. They're behind the scenes. You don't really see them. But the general partners are working to get those returns. And so if you're interacting with them, they want to advise you. They want to ensure that you're going to get the returns that they need for their investors. Okay, and that's what they're leading you towards. Whereas private equity, and increasingly more people today are owned by PE. How many people know if they're VC or PE? Do you want to put that in the chat? Because more folks now are at companies that either, if they didn't go out of business, they might have been purchased by a private equity. Now, what they're looking for is either you're the lead company or you're something that's been acquired. And that makes a difference because what they're looking at, and you see, I have these 5 1s that equal, see, I see a combination of PE and VC here. The 5 1s equal 10. And what that means is what they're trying to do is they're trying to gain efficiencies and growth through consolidation. And then they'll sell to each other's customers and that sort of thing, but they're going to do layoffs within the companies in order to have a leaner team across all of these different products and services, right? So what you're trying to achieve in your business objectives makes a difference what type of investment and investors you have and what stage you are and things like that. And in both cases, they're expecting efficiency, and AI is that efficiency and that power of efficiency on steroids. So put in the chat, have you seen this Shopify CEO AI memo? Did you see this? It was maybe a week and a half ago now. Yeah, some people saw it. Okay. So rather than read through every line here, I'm not going to do that. But what you really want to think about here is how AI now is you're expected to use it effectively and efficiently. So it's not just about creating efficiencies. You're expected to accelerate your learning by using AI. This Shopify CEO basically said this is going to be part of your performance review, right? And increasingly, we'll probably see that as we transition into using AI more. And it's expected that you'll be self-directed as well as share your learnings with each other, right? And he did say the quiet part out loud. He's saying, hey, if you've got to prove that AI can't do it, if you want to add headcount or resources, prove AI can't do it first. Right? So AI is expected, and increasingly, if it's not expected in the company you're working in today, it either will be or you should be looking to jump ship because it's going to be a part of every company going forward. All right. Now, you may have heard of economic terms like EBITDA, Rule of 40, LTV, CAC ratio. And you might think, ooh, this is an important slide now. I'm going to screenshot it. I'm going to write notes. Don't worry. don't even bother, because in fact, these are all made up terms. Even though you've heard of them and you've heard that investors are very concerned about them, they're all made up. And so they're different at every VC or PE firm. They're different at every company because they're made up. And they've made them up because they're using them to identify if it's a good bet to invest, right? And so ultimately, Rule of 40 is about, the growth plus profit equaling 40, and sort of like what your margins are. And then for LTV to CAC ratio, they have a ratio here where you should be at least at 3 to 1, or 5 to 1 is even better. And they're all using profitability. They're also using COGS, which I'm going to mention in a second. But again, these are changing. And so Rule of 40 has already started in some cases to be Rule of 50. And because they're expecting more efficiencies with AI, and it will probably even become Rule of 60, maybe even Rule of 70. And all of these things change as the efficiencies and our tech change, and the expectations from our investors change. Now, something you may or may not have heard of, and has existed for a while, is ARR per FTE. Has anyone heard of this? Otherwise referred to as revenue per employee. Now, the thing about revenue per employee, some people have heard of this. Revenue per employee is basically they're looking at how many, how many employees do you have, and how much revenue do you have overall, right? And in the past, and they're looking at your overall efficiency at your company by looking at this ratio. And in the past, you'd have maybe like 175K per employee, at a startup or something like that. But what we're looking at now is that AI native companies are shooting to have, 1 billion in ARR in revenue with only 100 employees or 200 employees. That we're looking at increasingly smaller teams because they're looking at AI making teams way more efficient. And so how we step up and guide that AI and employ these agents and other tools is really important, because as the individuals, humans in those companies now, we really need to be on top of our game. So it also changes things for us. So that's why I just say, thank you, AI. It's changing all the economic terms that we're using, as well as how we're expected to step up in our roles. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of details about a P&L, because even my eyes glaze over when I look at a P&L, but it is important to know where you are on a P&L. And so I want to point out a couple of things here. So if you have no revenue responsibility in your CS team, and that will include, say, support, onboarding, professional services, and maybe your CSMs, then you're going to be firmly in this area of COGS, which I mentioned earlier. If you have revenue responsibility, then you're going to be down in operating expenses. Now, I have all of these things in boxes, and I have this blue line. What is this? What I'm going to show you just quickly here is we have revenue minus, so we have revenue here, right? And then we have COGS, and then so revenue minus COGS equals profit, your margins or your gross profit. And then we have this blue line, and under here is your operating expenses. And this is anything that is contributing to revenue. So if I show this a little more simply, above the line, you have revenue minus COGS equals your gross profit or your margins. And below the line, you have everything that is contributing to revenue, right? And so when you've ever been through layoffs, if you've been surprised by a layoff, and you see, well, sales isn't doing their job, they haven't brought in new revenue, why are we getting laid off? That's why. Because when there's less revenue and these companies now need to show that they're profitable, that's why they have to. They have to reduce COGS in order to show profitability. And it shouldn't be a surprise to you any longer. If you see that there's lower revenue, whether it's from new customers, renewing customers, or expansion revenue, if you have decreasing revenue, you should expect that there's going to need to be adjustments in COGS. Okay, that's just straight out how it is. And in order for our companies to show their investors that they have a way towards profitability, or especially if they're trying to get more revenue from new investors. Is that starting to make sense here a little bit? I hope. Now, why? Why am I telling you all of this? Why? So to be able to build a modern CS program, you need tools. You can't get away from it. You can only work off of Google Sheets for just so long. And to get tools, you need to make your business case. And your business case is based on your contributions to the business, how you contribute revenue, how you save costs, and your margins, AKA profitability. All right. And so very simply, revenue minus costs equals margins, AKA profitability, right? And so business metrics like margins are one of the ways that you can make your business case. And if you've gone round and round and ever trying to make your business case, this is, where really, if you get down and you're showing this, this is how you're going to do it. So anybody who's trying to buy churn zero today, or make the case for keeping churn zero, this is something to think about. Now, to do any of this in terms of making your business case, you do need to know your costs. Now, these numbers are from some years ago, but it's the interactive part again. Want to just match the cost to acquire a new customer to these other activities here, retaining an existing customer, upselling, referral sales. Any thoughts? 5x versus the 0.1x. Where do these belong? Anybody with me here? Anybody here? Which one's 5x is CAC? You got it. Cost to acquire new customer is the most expensive. And basically you go down the line, retaining the customer is X. The referral sell from an existing customer is the least costly incremental cost that you have, okay? So it's really important to know what your costs are. And they're going to be different at your company, but you should definitely identify what they are at your company. Now, again, if we're going to look at a source of revenue, how would you match these numbers? And if you're going to guess that it goes in order again, that's a good guess. Basically, existing customers are 4 times likely to be a source of increased revenue over new prospects, and certainly over cold calls, right? So what you would want to keep in mind when you're making your business case is how likely your customers how likely you are increasing revenue at your company. And that will help you identify opportunities for how tools will help you and things like that. And again, these are just representative numbers. Know what they are at your company. Now, the good news is, if you're wondering, well, how am I going to figure this out? You actually have a simple tool right under your nose that is literally the foundation for everything you need to build a repeatable revenue system to ensure that you are building the revenue that you want and need in your company for renewals and expansions. So the simple tool, drum roll here. I'm going to do my own drum roll because I can't hear you. It is your customer journey. And you're like, okay, so why am I here just to learn about a customer journey? But this is a little bit different. This is a little special. What I have here are some different columns here that show the activity, separates out what the customer is doing versus internal and what channel you're doing something. If it's an email, if it's a template, email template, if it's an automated email, any of these kinds of things, or if it's something else, a virtual meeting, in-person meetings, things like that. And then you also have here, you have in this sort of top area for each stage, you have your milestone events, your outcome or transformation, and your exit criteria. Now, if you know these things, if you identify these things for each stage in your customer journey, then what you've identified essentially is your success path. And this is what your customers need to do, and your successful customers, in order to be successful using your product to achieve their business objectives. And the good news is you can create your own data, because when you've identified all these milestone events, the outcome or transformation, the exit criteria, you can then find ways to track this and have a date timestamp for this, and ways that you can do this in your working day, so that you can identify if your customers are on track to succeed or not, right? If they're off track, and you can identify this earlier on in their journey, in their life cycle. And from this, then there's so many things you can build out. You can identify which customers are on track and off track. You can project your revenue. You can project what your white space is, all of that. But you can also go through a customer journey here, where you're identifying opportunities for what can be automated, where you can use AI, where you might have, let me go to the next slide actually, just to then pull back here. This is then your repeatable revenue system when you build out the success path. And when you identify in the customer journey, when you're sort of listing out, you can literally list out all of these activities, then you can take a look and you can see where your gaps are, where your duplications are, if you have unnecessary activities and time spent, what is high level of effort, right? You want to pay special attention to that, because those are often also your blockers, either internally or for your customers. And ultimately, all of this brings together your opportunities for automation, for AI, and for agents. Okay, are you with me here? I want to see something in the chat. Are you with me here? All right, thank you. Got one, at least one person, a couple. All right, good. Now, when you're thinking about specifically AI automation, because frankly, the investors and your fellow executives are going to expect that you're already incorporating some sort of automation. They want to know how you're making it even easier, how you're adding in AI, right? Because we have a lot of AI powered tools now. So I want to give you 4 questions now. How many people here are already, using some sort of automation? I want to get a sense. Are you doing anything with automation or AI? Anybody starting to use AI in any way? Okay, yes, automation. What about AI? Anybody starting to dabble in AI? Got some yeses. All right. So now the difference between automation and AI, sort of automation you can think of as sort of choose your own adventure in that traditional sense, when you think of the original video games, where you get to the end of a path and you can turn left or right. You have to then, program in if it goes one direction or another. And if it has to gather information from somewhere, you have to program in exactly what field, where is it bringing it. When it's AI, then you're starting to build in some capabilities where it can analyze some of that information, right? But The four questions that I want you to think about when you're thinking about AI automation, and if you want to add AI automation in when you're looking at that customer journey and how you're going to make improvements in it, is you want to first find, determine just for like a quick, easy win, do we currently have the data? Is the task repetitive? Does it currently take manual effort? And does it have a strategic business impact? Because especially this last question, it can be, something that meets all the other criteria, but if it doesn't really move the needle, if it doesn't have a business impact, if it isn't strategic, then it's not going to be your top choice. Okay. So now if you're looking at this here, if it's if it's in the yes section here for these questions, this is where you're looking at standardized and predictable data. You're looking at some sort of repetition, some sort of pattern or consistent volume. Maybe you want to build out, something that helps your CSMs prepare for their business reviews, and you do them at a particular cadence. That would be a pattern that would say yes. If there's some sort of specific time investment, maybe it's taking them an hour or 2 hours in order to prepare for just a half hour or an hour meeting. That would be a really big clue. That's a big time investment. And if it's going to have an impact on your business objectives, the way that you want to bring value to your customers, there might be KPIs, maybe it has something to do with compliance, right? If it's vague, if you're not really sure the effort, if it's ad hoc, if your data is scattered or not predictable, these are your clues, like move on. This is not necessarily a good candidate for AI and automation, right? But then once you've identified the project, I want you to go through and ask a few more questions. And I want you to think about, what are you really trying to drive at? What is the end result, right? And you do want to think about these questions before you dig in and just, dive in and try and build something, because you got to know where you're going, right? You got to know where's your destination. And then oftentimes, if we think about what metrics we use, we don't necessarily think about how we're going to track and measure them, and if we're going to make it easy for ourselves to track and measure and see that. And so I want you to also think about that. And then change management. We often will just gloss right over this, and we don't think about how we're going to roll it out, how we're going to adjust and get everybody on board for the new processes. So change management is certainly part of it. And then how you want to test, iterate, and improve. Because too often we'll, get something in place and we're like, good, done, next project. But in fact, you need to test and iterate and improve it to make certain that it's really working and it's really going to give you the results you need. Okay. Now, I've been talking a lot about agents and agentic AI, and I want to know, I think some people have heard about agentic AI, but maybe not everybody. So I want to just briefly talk about this, because increasingly now, and if you haven't started with AI, definitely get started. But if you haven't started with agentic AI, this is where you need to go next. All right. Because this is where, well, just briefly, what is the difference between these? So an easy definition to think about the difference between AI automation and agentic AI is, AI automation really works with you. You're going to have some sort of human intervention or involvement, right? You're going to have a conversation with it, or you might guide it, or it might guide you, right? Whereas agentic AI is going to work for you. It's just going to go off and do some tasks and then bring it back to you, right? And for AI automation, you're going to specify each step, whereas agentic AI, it's all in how you're building it up. You're going to be providing tools, objectives, parameters, prompts. And so then you're going to need to test and develop it, because you got to trust it. It's going to have to go and work without your guidance once you get everything working, right? So once you hit go on that, you want it to, to work. And so That's different than the human steps and the response that you're doing throughout the process with AI automation. Now, some examples of AI automation, because it can be very powerful, is when you bring together, say, your sentiment and your product and your financial analysis, and you're putting all of that together, and AI is analyzing it. And from there, you've got, triggers and playbooks and things like that. And some of those things may be automated. They're sending off emails, or they're alerting you and adding you something to your to-do list, or any kinds of things you can do. It can be really powerful what you can do with that. Or if you think about like customer service bots, right? That's also going to be AI automation, and how it's interacting with your customers, but at some point, then it's going to go to the next level. You're going to have humans involved. Whereas what you're looking at, oh, good, Scott, it's great to see that you're sharing some things here. I love that in the chat. One example that I like, and this is something that we spent a lot of time over in CX Exchange Success Hour talking about, and I'll share the link for that pretty soon. But one thing that you'll see is like oh, sorry, I'm getting back to the example. So like a dentist office assistant, if you say needed to, you could have an assistant, an agent, call your patients and say, hey, it's time for you to make your checkup appointment. And they can introduce themselves as an AI agent and say, I'm, calling on behalf of your dentist. And they can literally go through the whole process to set up the appointment. And then afterwards, once they've made the appointment, send out a follow-up email with the calendar invite. And they can even then, after that, check to see that the insurance is all aligned and that's set up properly, send out emails for that, and get everything ready to go so that they can just show up to the appointment, right? Or like, say, customer education. If you have agents involved in your customer education, you can actually build out new types of videos, new types of materials. It can be offered as, drip to the customers when they need it, as they need it. There's a lot of ways in which you can build out all kinds of agent tools, and I'm just mentioning a couple there. But essentially, agents are doing complex tasks for you. Does that make sense to everyone? Sort of like the difference in how you're going to set that up. And literally, there are no code tools, literally at agentic.ai. You can start experimenting with, and you can use these, try them out for yourself personally and use them to build for even within your company to try things out. Now, I went over a lot, okay? And with everything I went over all this economic stuff and AI and building out the customer journey and all these things. And you might be wondering if this is something you can do. And if this is what it takes, are you really can you really make an impact on your business? So I want to ask you again in the chat, just indicate by writing me or not me. So for an example, if I say, I'm not an artist, and you've never really felt very creative, maybe you've said that before, just write me. And if you say, and it's like, no, I feel pretty creative. No, I'm an artist. I feel like an artist. Yeah. Then you write, not me. Does that make sense? So I'm not an artist. Me or not me? Let's see it in the chat. I'm looking over, not me. All right, we've got some creative folks and some folks who I don't know if I'm creative. Okay. What about I'm not good with names? Now, I know I've said that before. I've always trying to get better at it, but I've actually said that. I try not to say that. Oh, some people are really good with names. All right. Now, I'm not good at math. Anybody ever say that? I'm not good at math? Yeah. Yeah, some people, yes, some people no. All right. Okay, great. Now, here's a picture of 18 to 24-month-olds. Now, which of these babies is the artist? Can you just let me know which one's the artist? Anybody got ideas about which one's the artist? Which one's good with names? Okay. Which one is good at math or sales? and who's the executive team leader, who's the CEO, right? So I'm making a point because none of these kids were born knowing how to draw, do math, sell, or manage. None of us were. These are all learned, right? And technically, none of these kids were actually born because it's an AI generated image, so details. But my point is, we gravitate, towards certain things, right? And we gravitate towards what we're rewarded for, what we're told we're good at, and what we've worked hard at, right? And what we practice at. And that's how we learn, right? And so it's all of these things that we're good at, we learned it in part by what we tell ourselves. All right. And so we have the power to tell ourselves limiting beliefs, or we can empower ourselves with positive messages. So here's some example of some limiting beliefs. Has anyone heard of a fixed mindset? Fixed mindset. You're born that way. No change is possible. I'm just not good at math, so why do I bother? You do that for me. I'm not good at math, right? Now, if you think about a growth mindset, it can literally be as simple as adding the word yet and giving yourself permission to learn. So I want you to take a minute and think about, what are you telling yourself? How are you limiting yourself? And so if you want to write this down, you don't have to write it in the chat, but if you want to take a minute and write it down, have you said any of these things before? And if you've said it in the negative, right, you're actually limiting yourself. Can you add the word yet to the end? Can you just right now add something that's a limiting belief and add the word yet to the end and give yourself permission to learn it? All right. Now, if you want to work on any of these things that I've covered today, I truly believe that learning in a community helps empower you to exchange, and it really, you exchange ideas, and you really accelerate. And a little secret here is that X after Jan Young CX is actually for accelerate. The X in everything with me is actually for accelerate. So I do have a couple of options, and I'm going to share some links with you. If you like to do sort of like a DIY, and you want to be part of a volunteer-led peer-to-peer exchange community while you're learning and making advancements and changes and improvements in your program, you might be interested in one of the communities I lead. It's called the CX. Well, it's called CX Exchange, but the website is the CX Exchange. Now, also, if you're interested in learning more about ideas and things like that I think about, I have a newsletter. And so you can also sign up for my newsletter. And I think I've already shared with you, but I'll share again how to stay connected with me, because I love the community on LinkedIn. So you can also do that. But I have, coincidentally, literally, I have a new cohort for the CS Business Leadership Accelerator that is starting May 1st. And so if this is something where you want guidance and you want to be part of an executive leader community to accelerate how you're implementing these kinds of changes and learning about all of these things, you want to really dig into it, you should definitely consider this. And you can think about because it's the doors closed tomorrow. For anybody who's here today, if you email me, I will extend it to Monday, but you do need to be in touch with me, and we'll check and see if it's really something that is a good match for you. But I strongly believe that we all learn better in communities. And that's why I have so many, the two different kinds of communities where you can learn. And that's why we all come together in webinars and why I like to make them so interactive so that we can all learn together. So that's really what I'm most passionate about. And that's what I really hope that you will take away from today is that we really need to step up into our business leadership and take in and build our skills using AI and take away those fears and really start, one step at a time, but really start looking at how we can start to build and grow and improve, our CS systems and our programs for our team, for our customers, and for our companies. So that's really what I wanted to be sure to share with you today. Oh, and whoops, I don't think I hit enter on that. But then if we still have time for questions, I wanted to make certain that we had time for questions. And so Corey's here to help with that. And if any of this feels a little intimidating and you're like, oh, I don't want to ask a question because that's probably too basic. The whole point and why we, whether it's Success Hour or in the accelerator, we always make certain that the more basic the question, the better, but also even more advanced questions. All questions are good because it helps us kick the tires on it and it helps everyone learn together. So if you have questions, I want to be sure that we get to them. And I have no idea. I haven't even looked to see if we do have any questions. Do we have some questions?
Yeah, we would. Yes. So please go ahead and submit your questions. Thank you so much, Jan, for that presentation. That was really great. And please, yeah, go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. That would be awesome. Our first question is, if you don't currently have access to your company's finance data,
Mhm.
how would you suggest going about gathering those metrics to help you tell your, efficient growth story?
Yep, absolutely. Well, the first thing is you should have access to your account revenue, right? And so that's the very first thing. And make certain then you have that data on an account level. And that's the first thing we make certain that every leader does in the accelerator as well, is you want to have that on, you want to start tracking the important data on an account basis. Now, your CFO or VP of finance, folks over in your finance team, they're usually just looking at it in the aggregate. And they might look at like your top 10 and, bottom 10, things like that, but they're not looking at it specifically because that data is not as for them it's the bottom line, whereas for you need to have that on a per account basis in order to make it actionable, right? Because that's when you can start to slice and dice your data. So just start with the revenue, and then after that there are ways to build up and understand what your costs are. And you understand what your costs are by understanding how much time you're putting into the different types of activities you're doing. And so that's, again, we can go back to the journey. You can understand what you're doing, what your team is working on. You can identify then how much time it takes to do those activities. You can also take a look at how much time it takes to onboard, your customers, or how much time it takes, in terms of support and what types of tickets there are and the severity of the tickets. You can get a lot of this data. Then when you go to your finance team and you say, hey, I want to look at what I should be plugging in for the FTE, the full-time equivalent cost of an employee for this, and they're like, maybe I'll give that to you, maybe I won't, because it's not really like it's an average number. It's not like how much does Joe earn? It's really like an average number. Sometimes they'll share it with you, sometimes they'll get nervous. That's okay. If they share it with you, great, plug it in. If not, you can go out there and look at general numbers out in the market and say, okay, here's an average number. I'm just going to put that in. And
Mhm.
you can, and as long as you have that in a separate cell where you can adjust it, then when you're going through and figuring out what your costs are, then you bring something together and then you know what your margins are, because revenue minus cost equals margins.
Mhm.
Then you go to your finance team and you say, okay, so this is what I think my margins are. And then they'll say, oh, well, yeah, that's actually off because of X, Y, or Z. It's like, okay, you want to give me the real data now? Because I'm
Yeah.
actually trying to see how we can be profitable. And then they're like, oh, you're trying to help me show, right? Because the CFO needs to show, finance team needs to show that they're profitable. That's what they care about. And you're like, yeah, I'm trying to show that we're doing this profitably. Then they get on board.
Yeah.
So there's, a lot of times CS leaders will try to say, I don't have the data. I can't get the data. Woe is me. I'm a victim. No, there's so many ways in which you can create the data. And that's what I really want to show. Whether you're building a repeatable revenue system, whether you're trying to figure out what your costs are, there's always a way for you to figure it out. And it does take a little bit of work up
Sure.
front, but frankly, no one else is going to do it. You're the one who needs to manage for your team, your profitability, or else you get caught unawares and someone's looking at it at an aggregate level and saying, here, just make an aggregate cut. Well, that doesn't help you. That doesn't make you more efficient, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, thank you for that answer and explanation. I think that was really helpful.
yeah.
We have a question, and I don't know if your thoughts on it or if you have an exact answer, but the question is, which roles are most at risk to be replaced by AI or automation and why? I'm not sure if you have like specific roles, but maybe there's tasks that come to mind, if not, you know, roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what's happening is we need to think about, as we're trying to scale our company's revenue, instead of, in the past, what was consistent in growth at any cost was the way that they got to growth was they hired more people. And CS leaders got used to thinking, I need to hire more people. And I think instead what we should be thinking about is not how do I hire more people to do this, but how do I become more efficient? How can I use AI to do this? Right. And so as we're trying to become more efficient and grow and be more effective too, then what we need to do then is think about where we start to use it. And so, folks in support, because support, the chat bot and that sort of thing, they feel like, now we don't need as many people in support. Well, that's not true. But what we do need is people in support who are going to be much more effective and understand the system and the products, right? Because if the chatbot is really good and you want to make certain that it is, if it's then the chatbot is really good and it can't answer your customer's concern, then the person needs to be that much better. And so you also want to think about what tools you have for humans so that then if they don't know it off the top of their head, if they, that they can access uh, tools that can help them, give the more complex answers and more customized answers to customers when they're working with them. So I think it's more about how we work differently,
Hmm.
maybe sometime in 5 or 10 years, and certainly in the next few years, as our teams will be expected to be smaller for the amount of revenue and growth that we have. We'll see that there's layoffs and that sort of thing, more so. But I think then what happens is AI is in a place where then we can actually will be more likely to build more tools and build more companies and things like that too. So I think that we just need to start thinking of ourselves instead of being a victim of a layoff to being more about how do we empower ourselves in this new era because tech is in a new era.
Yeah, I think that perspective makes sense. Um, let's see. Do you have any or what is the biggest mistake you've seen CS leaders make when trying to articulate their business case internally to leadership, maybe around tools, as you said?
Yeah, in fact, I can't remember if I did a post about that today or yesterday. Because I've seen like where I've coached CS, I've been coaching CS leaders who are saying, okay, I need to make the case for this tool, and they start going round and round and round, and they keep, like it's like, oh well, does it do this? Does it do that? Like, do show me a number on this, and in the end, I think ultimately what you need to do is start off with how is it tied to your business objectives? And so you really need to do your homework and understand, what sort of investors do we have? What stage are we at? What are we really driving at as a company? What's important? Because that's what you need to be sure that you're driving your team towards, as well as your tools are supporting that, right? And so first you want to make the case that like it helps us in this really important business objective. Then you want to have the numbers, and you want to show then where your obstacles are, right? And where what you're able to do today versus what you could do if you had a tool that let you do this other thing. But all of that needs to be in service to the business objective, right? And that's how then it makes more sense to the CFO, to the CEO, to the board, to your fellow executives. And that's how then it can be prioritized, because every team is also trying to make decisions about what tools to add and what things to do. And so, how does it make sense in terms of your overall business objective? And that's how it's really being, no one's trying to put you through a runaround on purpose. They're just trying to figure out, of our limited resources and dollars, what should we do first? What can we do? What are the three things we can do now? Things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We've reached the end of
Oh,
our
yeah.
time here today.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to remind you again, we'll be sending out a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides tomorrow. At the end of this webcast, you will see a survey pop up. We'd really appreciate it if you would just take a moment before logging off to complete the survey and provide your feedback on today's webinar, so we can take into consideration for our programming. And thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you, Jan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank
same.
you.
Thanks.
All
Bye.
right. Take care.